Hi, this is James Swallow, and you're watching WarpBeacon.
Hi guys, you're watching WarpBeacon, and today here with me is James Swallow, New York Times best-selling author for Horus Heresy, and the man behind all the novels for Blood Angels. Hi James.
Hey, how are you? It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming. So we got a whole list of questions for you here, asked by our viewers. And some of my own personal questions as well. I gotta use my position. So, okay, the first is, how did you become a writer?
You mean like right at the very beginning, or just like from Warhammer?
No, just a writer.
Well, it was something that I always wanted to do. As a kid, I used to write kind of short stories, and in my English classes at school, it was something that I really enjoyed. I started off originally as a journalist. I used to write for entertainment magazines, but I always wanted to be a writer and create my own stories. I did a few scripts. I wrote for one of the Star Trek TV shows, and I wrote a few short stories. And I ended up working for a publisher who did young adult novels, and I did a series of kind of science fiction ones for them. And off the back of that showed that I could be a novelist. And from there I went to a few other companies and started writing for them, and eventually that led me to the door of Black Library. Mm-hmm. I've been a Warhammer player back in the day of, the original Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, so I was familiar with the universe. And when I heard that they were looking for writers and people who were, familiar with the franchise, I came back to them and said, look, I'd really like to write for you guys, and that was how that got started.
Interesting. So that's how you got involved with 40K. You've been playing since the very beginning, since the Rogue Trader. Can you tell us, like myself, I've been playing since the end of the 4th edition, which isn't so long ago. It's just like 4+ years. And for you, it's like, wow, it's 25 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't play anymore. I mean, I used to play, like I said, I played back in 1st edition days, and I played for a few years then, but basically I kind of dropped out of the hobby because, and I'm embarrassed to say this, is because I'm such a poor miniatures painter. It's just my armies just looked so poor. So in the end, I moved more into kind of pencil and paper, like role-playing game sort of materials. But I always kind of kept a hand in. Occasionally I would play like the odd game, or I would hang out at branches of GW where a lot of my friends still played, and I still have a lot of friends who are war gamers, but I haven't been, I haven't had an army or been into the hobby in that way for quite a few years now. People always say to me, oh, what kind of army do you have? And I'm just say, like, I'm too busy working now, too busy writing to actually play. Plus, like I say, my painting really sucks. And I don't want to embarrass myself.
So, what was your army originally? What did you, like Space Marines maybe?
Oh yeah, Space Marines, yeah. I created like a homebrew chapter.
What was your name?
It was the Blue Blaze Irregular.
The Blue, excuse me, I didn't quite catch you there?
The Blue Blaze Irregulars.
Wow, Blue Blaze Irregulars. Wow, that's a mouthful. Interesting. Who is your favorite 40K character and why? It could be any character, maybe created by you or by someone else.
That's a great question. It's really hard to narrow it down, because I'm thinking of like lore characters from the Warhammer 40,000 universe. There are so many really amazing personalities on the side of good and bad, characters who have a lot of backstory and dynamics to them. Mm-hmm. I think I really like Dante, the master of the Blood Angels, mm-hmm. because I think he's got such depth, and he's this incredibly long-lived character, and there's so much backstory and interesting stuff to him. And he's fun to write, and also just fun to sort of like have in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if I had to pick one, I'd pick him. And maybe if I had to pick a bad guy character, I'd say maybe Abaddon. I think Abaddon's a pretty neat villain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Abaddon. True that. So, okay, we got a question from another interview, but it was asked to both you and Graham McNeil, so I'm going to elaborate on that. So, okay, Graham McNeil is bald, Dan Abnett is bald, Aaron Dembski-Bowden is bald, Ben Counter is almost bald. Does it mean that all these guys are the best of the Black Library's writers for Horus Heresy, and why they still haven't shaved you?
Well, you see, if I lost my hair, I would lose my power. So I have to, I have to keep my long hair and ponytail. I don't know why. I think it's just that maybe those guys do it just to kind of be more slipstreamed, to run faster. I don't know. It's just, it seems like. Although those, we shave their heads, they have all started to grow beards in recent times, and I was the one who was kind of the beardy guy at Black Library, so I don't know if the length of hair has a correlation to why you should be a Horus Heresy writer. It's just a weird coincidence, I guess.
Interesting. So they picked up the beards from you then.
I guess so.
Okay. So when you obviously at times you're writing several books in parallel at the same time. How do you keep track of all the events between them?
For the Horus Heresy series?
Yes, for Horus Heresy and other books, yes.
Well, for Warhammer 40,000 stuff, it's not such a strict problem because usually writers are kind of concentrating on their own series of books. Like Graham's doing his Ultramarine stuff, or Dan's writing Iron Snakes, or Aaron's doing Night Lords, I'm doing Blood Angels. But with the Horus Heresy, it's much different because it's almost like an ongoing television series. Each book is like an episode in the story, and we have a beginning and we have a middle, we have an end, and we know how things are going to conclude at the Horus Heresy. So we have to all be working together. So what we do is every sort of 3 or 4 months we go up to Black Library headquarters in Nottingham, and we sit around a table in the High Lords of Terror suite, and we have a conversation about what's going on, and we just make sure that we're all talking, we're all conversing. When we're not in the meetings, we're emailing each other and we're discussing what stories are coming up. Like right now, Graham McNeil's working on a new Horus Heresy title. And he and I have been discussing some elements of that because he wants to work in some stuff that I've put in references to my Garrow audio dramas. He wants to make sure that connects, that we don't have two characters doing two different things when they should be doing one thing. So we try and make sure that everybody is having that conversation, that we're all involved, and that we all keep the whole thing moving forward, and we make it so it works.
Yeah.
So it's not like confusing or we're kind of stepping on each other's toes.
Mm-hmm. So. About the Horus Heresy and Grey Knights, you essentially created the Nathaniel Garrow character from the ground up and expanded upon him, and made him into what he is today. And obviously, Garrow is one of the first Grey Knights. Obviously, well, we all know that.
Do you? Are you sure?
Yes, I'm quite confident that he's going to be one of the first Grey Knights. And do you like? Well, the recent Grey Knights Codex came out like about a year ago. Uh-huh. So did you have to work with Matt Ward on that to interconnect your Garrow character and the depiction of Grey Knights in his Codex? Is there any sorts of links there for you?
Well, the thing is, I have to say, first of all, I didn't create Garrow because he was already part of the existing look. Or what I did is I just expanded on the character that was there in the backstory. There's a lot of questions packed into that, really. First of all, I have to say that people say to me about the Garrow and the other characters. They say, "Well, these guys, these guys are obviously the Grey Knights." And I say, the answer, it's not as simple as that. It's not. That's not. It's correct. That's the correct answer, but it's not the correct answer because these guys are not the Grey Knights. Not the Grey Knights that you think of when you pick up a copy of Codex Grey Knights. They're not those guys. They haven't become that yet. It's maybe in the far future.
Yes,
the Grey Knights will grow into that. But what these guys are right now is they're almost like the prototype.
Yes.
For what that will be, and we have plans for those guys, how it's going to thread through the entire Horus Heresy. And I always say to people, it's not as simple as, oh, Garrow is a Grey Knight. It isn't as simple as that. It's much more complicated. And there are many things that are going to play out. You'll see, in the hopefully in the months ahead, when more Garrow stories come out, you'll gradually see how his role is involved in the heresy. But it's much more complex than that. But as to your question about the Codex,
yeah.
When the Codex was being written, I didn't work directly with Matt Ward on it, but when it was being written, one of the things that happened was the text was brought to us at the Horus Heresy meeting by Alan Merritt, who is the keeper of all lore and backstory for the Warhammer universe.
The guy who essentially created the Horus Heresy.
That's right, yeah. And so, this was brought to the table, and we discussed it, and we said, okay, well, this is what Matt's written for the Codex, and this is what we're doing. So we actually kind of asked for a few changes to be made to what Matt was writing to make sure that these things connect with each other well. Mm-hmm. And so there is stuff in the Codex that says, okay, this is how the Grey Knights were formed. This is like, Titan being dropped into the warp on the eve of the Siege of Terror and that kind of thing. You will eventually see those events in the Horus Heresy. Not for a while yet, because we've got to get to the Siege of Terror and we have a lot more stories to tell before we get there. But these things will eventually all kind of connect up. Mm-hmm. Just maybe not anytime soon.
Definitely not, no. There's still a lot of money to be made on that.
We've got a lot of stories to tell. We have a lot of distance to cover because the Horus Heresy goes on for, I think it's 7 years from start to finish. So we have to fill in, a lot of major events, a lot of material, and a lot of battles that have yet to be seen, a lot of legions that have yet to have their time in the spotlight. We have all these things we're going to do, but we do have an end in mind. People have said to me, "Oh, is it going to go on forever and ever and ever?" It's like, absolutely not. We will finish the Horus Heresy, but we don't want to kind of miss out on any of the cool stuff on the way.
Definitely not. No. Okay, so one of our viewers has got a very interesting question about your short story for Doom Eagles.
Oh yeah.
So he calls you a sentimental author. Actually, he claims that you are the most sentimental of all of Black Library's authors. And can you comment on that?
Well, that's a no. I don't. What does he mean by that? Sentimental. I mean, I suppose in a way. I mean, if you mean like, am I attached to my characters and do I care about them? Then. Yeah, definitely. I think that's true. But I think that's true of all of us. I think of all the guys who work on the series, I think we all have some sentimental feelings towards characters that we like. That doesn't mean to say that, we're not afraid to kill them off or do terrible, terrible things to them, though.
Yes, obviously. Yeah, because as other authors claim, it's actually quite fun to kill them at times.
Well, I always say that, if I care about a character a lot, that's always, good because it feels like I'm investing in them. But I have to be careful that you don't get too attached to them. I remember a story a reader said to me, she said she was reading my Blood Angels books, and there was a character in it who was a tech marine who was killed off. And she said, I was so angry. I picked up the book and I threw it across the room, and how dare you kill this guy? I really, really liked him. And I said, well, I've done my job right, because if you got to that scene and he died and you were like, oh well, who cares, he's dead, that would be bad. But the fact that you liked him and you were upset, that's right. That's what I wanted you to feel. I wanted you to feel the impact of that moment. I wanted you to feel bad about it. So I was happy that she was angry about it, because I felt like I did my job right in that kind of moment.
Okay. So, The Return, the Doom Eagles short story, I gotta say, it was really awesome. So can we expect any more stories about them in the future?
Well, I have a really kind of soft spot for the Doom Eagles, because those guys were the very first thing I wrote for Black Libraries. I did a short story called Crimson Knight for Inferno magazine back in the day. That got reprinted, I think, in the What Price of Victory anthology. And the same group of characters, I later on did another story with them where they turn up on a Necron tomb world. And I liked the character so much. The lead character was a Doom Eagle called Taricus, and I enjoyed writing him so much that when I was doing my Blood Angels novels, I found a way to work him in so he kind of has a guest starring role in one of my Blood Angels books. And that story just kind of puts him back on the board and leaves him off to one side. And I kept thinking to myself, I really want to go back and tell another Doom Eagle story, because they're just really fun to write. and they have a very different character to the Blood Angels or any of the other chapters. So
Certainly, yes.
I don't have any firm plans yet, I have to say, but I would really like to do it. Maybe a short story, another short story, or an audio or something, or who knows, maybe even a novel. But I would, I haven't forgotten about them, and I would really like to do another Doom Eagle story at some point.
Please do. I love that short story about Doom Eagles. I want to read more. Okay, so a question that might look out of the place here, but do you read any Russian literature, and do you have any favorites from that?
Well, you mean like kind of classic Russian literature?
Well, yes, obviously not the modern one. I don't think there is such a thing as a modern Russian literature at all.
I guess the only Russian authors who I've ever felt really incredible is Boris Arkady Strugatsky. The guys who wrote
Stalker,
Stalker and stuff like that. I remember coming across the short story that's based on Roadside Picnic and being totally blown away by it.
It is awesome, yes. So that's your favorite from.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. I mean, I think that there's such a strong tradition of great literature from Russia as well, and really good science fiction too. I don't think the problem is we don't see enough of it. Translated into English. I'd love it if we could see more.
Yeah, it's the other way around. Normally we get the translated literature, So, okay, now moving on to Blood Angels, okay?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're the head Blood Angel of the Black Library. You are the Dante, the Sanguinius, or, whatever you wish to call yourself. So, how did you come to write about them?
Well, that's very nice of you to say that. I mean, I gotta say, I do feel a lot of kind of kinship and connection to the Blood Angels. Obviously, I'm not the only guy who writes them.
Yes.
And there are other writers out there who've done great Blood Angel stories. But I definitely feel like the boys in red are kind of like my boys, and so I do feel a lot of connection to them. How I got to write them is after I did my two Doom Eagle stories. Lindsay Priestley, who was the editor at the time at Black Library, came to me and she said, we really like what you're doing. You've got a good handle on Space Marines. I'd like you to start Space Marines novels for us. And she gave me a list of all of the chapters. And she said, well, these are the ones that have been done. We've had Dark Angels books, we've had Ultramarines novels. We had, at the time, Ben Cantor was just doing his Soul Drinkers books and what have you. And I looked down the list and I said, why has nobody done the Blood Angels? I can't believe, it's the first founding chapter. Why has nobody ever written a novel about the Blood Angels? And she said, well, they're pretty difficult to get a handle on. And, I thought, well, really? Because I always thought they were very, very cool. Because they have a great dramatic element to their character, which is they have the thing that is their greatest gift is also their greatest curse.
Yes.
The whole thing about the Black Rage.
Yeah, their blood, yes.
Yeah, but what makes them what they are is their strength and their weakness at the same time, and that is a fantastic spur for a dramatic story. I said, you've got drama in these characters before they even do anything. It's just built into it. So I said, I will. Well, if nobody else wants to do this, I want to write the Blood Angels because there's so much that you can do with them, and that was that. And I did the first duology, which was the Deus Encarma and Deus Sanguinius, and Black Library were really, really happy with it, and they've asked me to carry on. And I did the next series, which was Black Tide and Red Fury, and I'm currently developing some more Black Library stuff for the Blood Angels at the moment, which I can't really talk about. But there's going to be definitely more Blood Angel stuff coming up.
Awesome.
And I've been away for a little while after doing. I did Fear to Tread, which was Horus Heresy era Blood Angels, which was the same thing but with a different kind of tone to it. And I really enjoyed writing that. But I'm looking forward to getting back into the saddle of writing more Warhammer 40,000 Blood Angel stuff.
So you are in love with Blood Angels, essentially.
I think that I think they're pretty damn awesome.
They're pretty cool. Who is your favorite character from your own Blood Angels novels?
Well, it's a difficult question to ask because it's kind of like asking a parent. Who's your favorite child?
Who's your favorite child? Indeed, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I really like writing Rafen because he's kind of this sort of Blood Angels everyman. He's the guy who's he's just an ordinary, as much as you can be an ordinary space marine, you know.
Yeah.
And he's the kind of guy who's thrust into these situations, and he has to kind of like work his way through it as best he can. You know, he isn't sort of super special in any particular kind of way. He's not like a chosen one. He's just a soldier who has to kind of do the best he can to make sure that his enemies are defeated and that the chapter kind of stays in the ascendant. And I really like writing him. Just got like a strength of character. In a way, he's very similar, I feel, to some of the character elements in Nathaniel Garrow that I like writing him as well. Is that they are soldiers who are doing their duty in terrible circumstances, and that is always engaging to write.
Obviously, you wrote the majority of Blood Angels novels, but there are some other authors appearing, like Andy Smile. Is he here to take over your reins on the Blood Angels?
Well, I don't think so. The thing is, Andy's not writing Blood Angels. Andy's writing Flesh Terrors.
Yeah.
Which is obviously they're a successor chapter, and I've written some Flesh Terror stuff myself in a couple of my stories. But there's he's writing. I guess you could say it's a similar kind of thing, but it's different.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Because the Flesh Terrors have they have the character of the Blood Angels. The reason they're cool is they're the black sheep of the Blood Angels family. They're the bad boys.
Yeah.
And they're interesting, and that they have a very different kind of take on what it means to be a Blood Angel. So what Andy's writing is a different flavor, I guess, of Blood Angels from what I'm writing. So it doesn't mean that kind of like, because he's doing it, I'm not going to do it, or because I'm doing a story, he's not going to do it. There's plenty of room. The Warhammer universe is huge.
Indeed.
There are millions of stories we can tell. There's a lot of room for other writers to come in and tell Blood Angel stories. Coming up very soon, we have a new writer, a guy called David Annandale, who is doing a limited edition novella about the character of Mephiston, who is the character that I've written about. And now David's coming in, and he's going to write about that character and take that character in some interesting directions. So there's a lot of room to maneuver. It's a very big game board, and there's a lot of pieces on it.
Are authors about to write something on Blood Angels? Do they have to consult with you?
Well, I would like I'd like to think so. I guess I suppose it's not kind of like they come to me. It's more like kind of we all talk about these things. We're all having a conversation, and I think it just kind of makes sense really to do that, doesn't it? If you have people writing about the same thing, setting it in the same. If I was, say, to give you an example, say I was going to do an Ultramarine story. I would write my story outline, and then I would take it to Graham and say, look, Graham, I'm going to do an Ultramarine story, and I'm going to do this. Does that screw up anything that you're doing, or does it, is there any plans that you have that this might not work for? And we would have a discussion about it, and he would probably say, oh, hey, could you put this reference in your story? Because my next novel about the Ultramarines is going to do this, and then we go, okay, so we can connect it all together. So it feels like it's all happening in the same world. The worst thing you get whenever you read a series of novels based on something is you read one book and it says, okay, well, this character goes over here and he does this. And then you read the next book written by another writer and it says, this character goes over here and he does that. And it's like, those two things don't connect. And it, to me, it breaks the kind of the immersion of the world. And that's always very, very poor. Because all you need to do is just send an email, make a phone call and go, hey, I want to do this. That's a cool idea. Let's do it like this and we can work together, It's all about collaboration. It's all about teamwork, because if we work together, then at the end of the day, we create stronger stories. And I think that's the most important thing for this, because that's what our readers want. They want strong stories that feel like they're taking place in the same world, and we as writers should try and do that as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. So, the Blood Angel's new mysterious character called Sanguinor, I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Indeed.
Is there, he created so much discussion and then so much fighting over who is he, what are his origins, and blah 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 and so on. Is there any chance you might expand upon this character?
No.
No.
So, I've had a conversation with Matt Ward where I basically said to him, who is the Sanguinor? I said, and he said, I'm not going to tell you. And I said, no, you have to tell me. because I'm writing about characters who would know who he is. So I have to, I said, I'm not going to tell anyone, but I have to know so that when I'm writing my stories, I don't accidentally give it away. And he said to me, okay, this is who the Sanguinary is. And he told me.
Oh, God.
And I said, okay, fair enough. So I know who it is, and no, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. Can I at least, make a suggestion? You don't have to confirm it or deny it. I'm just gonna think, I think he's this last bodyguard of Sanguinius. That's what I think. It's just,
Well, you mean like one of the Sanguinary Guard?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I forgot the name of them, Yeah. One of the last Sanguinary Guard that Sanguinius left on Terra.
Okay, well, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say yes or no, or confirm or deny.
Yeah. So, Astaroth the Grim is a very grim character indeed in your novels. So, how did he even become a reclusiarch if all he wants to do is behead his fellow brothers?
Well, the thing about Astaroth the Grim is, when the new codex came out, I was reading through it and I came across the character and I thought, this is a really cool character. And, I really would like to have him in a story. So I did a little short story that takes place after my first two Blood Angels novels, where Rafen is back on Baal, and Ash comes to see him to basically make sure he hasn't fallen to the Black Rage. Mm-hmm. And the thing that struck me about him is I thought, he has probably the worst job in the whole Blood Angels Legion. In fact, he must be the saddest Blood Angel there is, because he has to kill his brothers. And that is a terrible, terrible burden to have. I imagine the other Blood Angels look at him and go, oh my God, here comes Astaroth the Grim, and he must really like what he does. And I think, no, he doesn't like what he does. He hates the job he's got, that he has to kill, his brothers who have fallen into the rage and the fury. And I feel sorry for him, really, because he has to carry the terrible burden, and he's the only man who can do it.
And he's very thorough on it.
Yeah, so it must be, he doesn't, I don't think he enjoys his job at all, but he knows he's the only guy who can do it, and so he has to take on this terrible burden, and that, to me, makes him a very interesting character.
Moving on. If you could conduct an exterminatus on any planet of the 40K, which planet would that be?
Wow, okay. Which 40K planet would I blow up? Just one? Gee,
just one. Just one planet. And obviously, why?
I don't know. Well, I don't know what to pick.
See, you are the most sentimental. You are kind. You do not want to blow anything up.
No, it's the opposite, actually. I'm thinking there's two. One's not enough.
Oh, wow.
There's too many,
Okay.
If I would, I tell you, if I could do an exterminatus, I'd blow up the Orc homeworlds. All of them. Because I hate the Orcs.
Okay.
So, because I always think that, the Orcs, kill the Orcs, I think that comes from kind of, lose so many games to my friend who had an Orc army when I used to play First Edition. So I have a deep, deep hatred for the Orcs. So any Orc homeworld, I would exterminatus. Take that, Greenskin. Boom!
Okay. So, of all the factions of 40K you worked on, obviously aside from Blood Angels, which is your favorite?
I really like writing the Sisters of Battle. They were a lot of fun to write, because nobody had really done anything more than a couple of short stories with them before I asked if I could write Faith and Fire.
Yeah.
And they have a very different character from Space Marines, because whereas Space Marines are these genetically engineered transhuman super soldiers, they've been kind of raised from childhood, from their teenage years to be warriors of the Emperor. The thing about the Sisters of Battle is they're just ordinary human beings.
Yeah.
They don't have any sort of genetic implants or anything like that. I mean, obviously like power armor, and they have powerful weapons and that kind of thing. But when you get down to it, when you take that away, they're just ordinary people like you and me. The only thing they have is this strong, incredibly powerful faith in the Emperor. And that, I think, makes interesting characters, because it's how, you have to have these guys who don't have these abilities fighting alongside Space Marines who have all these amazing powers and sort of like implants and stuff that makes them more than human, and yet they can still fight on the same battlefield and still win through. That's very interesting to me, is what kind of person are you when you're powered by kind of your faith and your zealotry. That makes interesting characters to write stories about.
Indeed. Actually, I thought that Sisters of Battle, they do have some really minor genetical modification, or some sort of, maybe they give them some sort of shots that make them stronger or faster. Like, I thought that this is how it worked in the war. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, they don't have like, if you look at the process that you have for making a Space Marine with all the different implants.
Yes.
They don't have anything anywhere near as powerful as that.
Okay. Then I got a few personal questions about the Horus Heresy.
Mm-hmm.
The Flight of the Eisenstein is one of my most favorite books of all time. I absolutely love it. What was the most difficult part of that book for you to write?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your kind words. I had a great time writing that book, and it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of challenges for Flight of the Eisenstein because of, it's kind of funny talking about it now. We're 25 books into the series, and now here we are talking about the book 4.
Yeah.
Right at the very beginning, it sounds silly to say this now, but we didn't know if the Horus Heresy series was going to be a success. We didn't know if it was going to be popular, and so right at the very beginning, when we were writing the first books, it was kind of very delicate, and we were hoping that we would do the best job we could, and we weren't sure if it would be a success, and it was really rewarding when everybody just went crazy about how much they enjoyed it. And after the first 3 books had come out, if you read the first 3 books in the series, you get like a big story, and then a bigger story, and then an even bigger story.
Yeah.
And it builds and builds and builds through, Horus Rising, Force Gods, and Galaxy in Flames. And so they said to me, well, you have to follow that. And I was like, oh man, how can I beat that? These first 3 books just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I couldn't write a story that was even bigger than that, because it would just be too crazy. So I had to change the focus a little bit. So if you read the Eisenstein is actually a smaller story, deliberately so, because instead of it being about big space battles and huge kind of massed combat, it's actually a story about just one guy. Really, it's just a story about Nathaniel Garrow.
Yeah, it's like a personal escape.
Yeah, and it's a story of his journey, and so that was done very deliberately to kind of say, you read 3 books, and that's that kind of the opening overture of the story, and then from this point onwards, the stories are going to be different. You'll get big stories and small stories. So that was a challenge to do that. The other challenge was kind of getting the backstory correct, because there were like 3 or 4 different versions of Nathaniel Garrow's story from various different editions of the lore and then different rule books, and some of them were contradicting each other, and some were saying one thing and some were saying something else. And I had to take all of those and say, okay, well, I have to drill down and find the core truth in all of those things and make sure I stayed to it. So what I hoped I did in the end was, with Flight of the Eisenstein, is that's the definitive version of what happened in those events, and all the other backstory, kind of like, people telling that story 10,000 years later, and they got some of the details wrong, and some stuff is confusing. But what happens in the novel, that's what actually happened. So it was difficult to find that. And I guess the biggest challenge beyond that was just getting the character of Nathaniel Garrow, because the whole story rotates around him, and so it was important to make sure that I got that right, and I think in the end it came together really well, and I was very pleased with the way it worked.
It certainly did. I gotta say, it certainly did. So, now you're still working on Nathaniel Garrow and your audio dramas?
Yeah.
And how many more of those can we expect, to the part where the Grey Knights are actually founded?
Well, we haven't decided a set number yet, but there are definitely going to be more. I have just, like, this week and last week been chatting with the guys at Black Library about story ideas, as we were looking at the timeline for the Heresy, and we're saying, okay, how about this kind of story, or how about this kind of story, and we're just discussing the ideas right now. So we don't have a set number, but you will definitely see more. I should think that at some point in the future you will see a novel with Garrow, even 2, depending on how things shake out.
Yeah.
So right now, all I can say is there will be more Garrow stories, but I can't say how many.
Please write more about the Rubio. I love him.
Oh, Rubio definitely as well. Will be part of that, and Baron as well. Because they're kind of part of that team now. So you will also be seeing more stories about those 2 guys.
Yeah, it's very interesting to read about their interaction because they're so different. They come from different legions, and now they're all in the same boat. But they're still they still retain most of their character of their parent legions because this is what they are. They will always be like this, and I just love reading about this. How they. I think you should dive deeper into this interaction between them.
Oh, definitely. You can expect to see more of that.
So. Let's talk about your other Horus Heresy novel, which is the Nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you get the idea behind it? Because it is such a different novel from all the rest of the Horus Heresy novels. It's so different. It's it's one of those novels that isn't centered on Space Marines as much as others are. And generally, how did you get the idea behind all these assassins, all these, because he introduced some different clades that are not in the game, and I don't think they actually existed in the lore before. Maybe I'm just wrong because I haven't been playing the game for as long as you did.
There's the
Venom and
the Veneum, the Veneum and the Vanus.
Oh yeah.
Those are actually those were 2 assassin temples from the very, very early.
Oh, so they did exist.
Yeah, but there was no. If you read those codexes, they would just be like mentioned, but they weren't actually characters you could play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I wanted to bring those on, and it never explains what they did. It just says that there were 2 other assassin temples, and these were their names. So I wanted to explain what their kind of signature weapon and skill was. So yeah, they were things from the early kind of editions of the lore. But as to how the Nemesis came about, it was a story meeting we were having. It was me, Graham McNeil, and Dan Abner, and we were sitting around talking about the Prospero books, Prospero Burns and Thousand Suns, and we were having a discussion about how those 2 books were going to be written. And I was in the room, and I was kind of not really contributing very much because we were talking about Dan and Graham's books, and I just I hadn't got anything on the schedule at that point.
Yeah.
And as we were having this conversation, one of the things that came up is we started talking just briefly about the Officio Assassinorum. And as Dan and Graham were having this conversation about the Space Wolves and the Thousand Suns, I suddenly thought, why haven't we done a story about the Assassinorum? And so I started making some notes. And by the end of the meeting, I said, you know what, guys, I think I've got an idea for another book. And I said, how about we do something like this? And I put the story out there, and I said, we could do this and this. And all the guys in the room were like, that's a really cool idea. And at the end of the meeting, I remember Graham came up to me and he said, are you going to write that? Are you going to write that Assassin's novel? And I said, I'm thinking about it. And he said, well, if you don't, I will. because it's a really cool idea. And I said, okay, fair enough then. So I worked up a proposal, and I took it to the editor, and I said, look, how about we do this? We show that the Horus Heresy, although it is about Space Marines fighting Space Marines, but there is a bigger world out there, and there are other people, ordinary people, and getting affected by what's going on. And plus, we've got this kind of assassin war going on, like a secret war, taking place underneath it. And we could write something that is not just Space Marines, because most of the Horus Heresy is going to be about Space Marines fighting Space Marines, but we can show a different side to the Horus Heresy, and that was the core concept behind the idea. So that's why you do get some Space Marines in the story, but it's not really about them. It's about a different aspect of that battle.
Mm-hmm. It is a fantastic book. Can we expect anything more on the assassins in the Horus Heresy?
I don't have anything planned right now, but we do have some more ideas about showing the kind of the secret war that's taking place. So there might be some more Assassinorum stuff in there. Anything is possible.
Interesting. Okay, we're running out of time here, so one last question for you. What are you working on right now?
Nothing I can talk about, really.
Oh, okay.
I've just got I've just done a novel for another board game, actually, a board game called Tannhauser, which is a kind of alternate history of World War II game. I've just done a novel for that called Enigma, and that's going to be coming out in March. And I've also written an ebook for the Star Trek The Next Generation series. But in terms of Warhammer-related stuff, I am currently working on developing an outline for a new Blood Angels book, which we are hoping will be a Space Marines battles novel. But that's in very early stages right now. And then beyond that, I've got some ideas for some more, as I say, some more Garrow stories and some more Warhammer 40k Blood Angel stories. But nothing official. More stuff will be announced later in the year.
Okay. Out of all the different books by Black Library, Horus Heresy, and 40k, if you had to pick like 2 or 3 favorite books of other authors, what would that be?
Oh, definitely Horus Rising was a really fantastic piece of work. I still get bumps when I think about that, reading some of the sections in that. I think Dan did a fantastic job with the kind of opening salvo of storytelling for Horus Rising. I really like the Shira Calpurnia novels that Matt Farah has done. So, and he has a really, really fantastic writing style. It's hard, it's hard to narrow it down really, because if I don't mention any of the other guys, they're going to say, "Why didn't you mention my books? Don't you like my book?" It's but it's great. I mean, I've read stuff by pretty much every member of the team. I love Gav Thorpe's Angels of Darkness. I like Aaron's Space Aaron's Imperial Guard novel was really fantastic, and he's done some great stuff with the Night Lords. I really liked Storm of Iron by Graham McNeil. It's really fantastic being able to work with a team of talented guys and girls as well. People like Sarah Corkwell, who did the Gildar Rift.
Yeah, we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking to Sarah Corkwell in one of our next episodes as well.
Yeah, I guess we're, like I said to you early on, we're a team of people who are invested in Warhammer. We're all fans of it, and you can really see that when you read the books. Yeah. I think the love that we have for this stuff, the passion we feel about it, we put it up there on every single page. We wouldn't be writing these books if we weren't fans of it.
True. It really does show. Okay, thanks a lot for coming, James.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
It was absolutely fantastic and amazing. I hope that our viewers are going to like it as much as I did.